Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. Today, I am looking forward to interviewing the lovely Carla Butler about her journey from corporate life to coaching and how she now helps other burnt-out professionals improve their lives by managing and improving their sleep. Welcome, Carla. It's lovely to have you on the show.
Thanks, Leah. It's so nice to be here.
Carla, I always like to start at the beginning, so I'd love you to talk us through your own career journey and how you've left the corporate life and become a sleep coach over the last number of years.
Yeah, absolutely. So, gosh, it's been a long journey to get to this point, and quite a few things, I guess, have sort of happened along the way. So, I'll try to sort of keep it as succinct as possible. Okay. So I've always struggled with sleep, and it's funny looking back because what I now know is even though I was obsessed with it, thought I was doing quite well, I actually knew nothing and I was doing all of the wrong things. And a big part of my challenge was the work that I was doing, the stress. So I worked at one of the big banks for a number of years. Highly stressful, long hours. And, to combat that, I was drinking a lot. I was not loving the work. I mean, I was loving the money, but I was at a time in my life where, unfortunately, I did actually prioritize the money probably over my own wellness. And it took me a number of years to kind of, I guess, flip that. And so, during that time, my mum passed away, and that was one of the first kind of real, I guess, eye-openers for me, really kind of made me step back and really think about what I was doing with my life. And from that, I actually left that job immediately. So I didn't actually go back after I went back to New Zealand to go through all that process. So I didn't go back to that job. And it was interesting because I sort of started to think about what I did really want to do. And I guess one of the things that had always kind of been there, but I think mum passing away had sort of brought to the surface was I really want to help people. I want to do something that is actually worthwhile. And so it was funny because shortly after I told that organisation that I wasn't coming back, I actually had a friend who was a recruitment agent call me and say, "Hey, honey, I've got the perfect job for you." And I thought, that's weird. Like I've literally only, finished this other job. And it was actually for another organisation where I had been offered several jobs there in the past. But again, because I was so addicted to the money, I had turned them down. And so it was already an organisation that I knew. I knew that they were great. I knew lots of people that were working there and they had a great reputation. So I thought, yeah, great. This is all about helping people. We'll get in there. Well, it'll be fantastic. So it was interesting. It was great to start with, but I sort of realised as I went on that I was sort of going through the same kind of process or doing the same things that I had been doing at the old organisation. So long hours, wanting to please people, working so hard, again with the drinking, highly stressed, couldn't turn off over the weekend. So if something happened during the week, I was just in an absolute mess all weekend. Yeah, it was not great. And then my dad passed away, and that was pretty full on. So when mum passed away, she'd been sick for a long time. So whilst it wasn't fully expected, I was there with her. It was a little bit easier to deal with. Dad passed away unexpectedly. And so that was quite a big shock. And again, I just had this moment of realization. What am I doing with my life? I need to be helping people. I've got this desire to help people. So I left that role, and that was actually when I started pursuing the Fireys initially. So, went through that process. Again, it's such a great career, right? I felt like it would have given me all of the things that I was looking for. It was physical. You had this really great camaraderie where you're working in a team. And of course, you're helping people, right? So that didn't pan out. And ultimately, I actually ended up opening my own wellness business. But then, and I can't remember exactly, I can't pinpoint exactly when this occurred, but I remember reflecting back on Dad and his life. And I came to this realization that he and I actually had a lot of similarities in our lifestyles. We were both doing stressful jobs. We both drank most nights, and we both had terrible sleep. So that was kind of a bit of an eye-opener for me. And I thought, okay, shoot, maybe I need to sort of, even though I already consider myself to be pretty healthy and have a pretty strong focus on wellness, I probably need to make some changes. Otherwise, potentially I'm going to sort of end up checking out early as well. So I decided to start with sleep. And essentially, I just started studying for my own interest. And I was running the wellness business, the sport recovery business, wellness business at the same time. And through all of the study, I ended up figuring out what was going on with me, fixing my own sleep. And to be honest, I was actually quite surprised that it worked. Like, I don't know what I was expecting, but successfully figured out my own sleep, figured out what the cause was, what I actually needed to do to fix it. And initially decided to bring this sleep coaching aspect into my existing business, because I figured I'd been able to sort myself out. And this was a really, I guess, great opportunity to actually make quite a big difference in other people's lives. Because for people who are struggling with sleep, it's really, really impactful. And so I started coaching, I did more study, and then ultimately actually ended up closing that face-to-face business because I was sort of probably a little bit distracted with doing both, but also really felt that the sleep coaching was where I, could really make the most difference. So here we are today.
Wow. And I think we met maybe 5 years ago when you were looking to join the Fireys.
Yep.
I find it really interesting because I'm someone who have been an insomniac in the past. I've got a couple of friends who are insomniacs, and my sleep has definitely improved, but I think that is only because I go to bed very late. And I'm interested in whether you find it, because I think as a lot of women, I'm running a business. I've got 3 teenagers. There's a lot of washing. There's 2 dogs to be walked. Like, I find I actually don't physically have enough hours in the day to get everything I need to do. And so often I'm doing work at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, folding, washing. And often I can't rest until I know all of that's done.
Yep.
So I'm interested, do you see a lot more women than men, or is it evenly balanced?
I definitely see more women than men. I would say it is probably maybe like an 80-20 split. I always sort of thought that maybe that was partly because I think women tend to be a little bit better at asking for help. But you've raised a really good point, right? Because quite often we're raising the kids. We're also we're not raising the kids by ourselves, obviously, but we have got kids. We are also working. We do tend to probably do a little bit more around the house. And so there are a lot of these extra responsibilities. And you're right, time just gets away. And I do actually see multiple clients who quite often, they won't necessarily have kids, but they do have 2 jobs. So they'll be, for example, a coach, but they'll also be, they'll be an allied health professional, for example. So, getting up early to coach people at a gym, working their day job, trying to squeeze in some training at night, and there's just not enough time, overnight to actually get a decent amount of sleep. So often it's about kind of grabbing a little bit of extra time when we can. And I had a client recently speaking, and he was exactly in this position as well, actually, as a myotherapist, about whether, there's a half an hour during the day where he can actually grab a nap, because he can actually sleep quite well. He just cannot get long enough to sleep.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because I've never been a napper. Like, even when I had babies who kept me awake all night, I could never sleep during the day. And I'm so envious of people who can have a little nap. My eldest daughter can just hop on her bed and be out of it for 40 minutes. People who can sleep on planes. I've never been able to sleep on a plane, never been able to sleep in a car. Some of us just seem to be wired a little bit differently, don't we?
Absolutely. And I'm exactly the same. So I cannot nap unless I'm quite ill. So last week when I had the flu, I was napping. But otherwise, I cannot, no matter how tired I am, I cannot nap. So, yeah, for people like us, we really do need to focus on trying to get not only sufficient sleep, but sufficient quality of sleep over that nighttime period. So, yeah, it can definitely be challenging.
So obviously, some people need more sleep than others. I would say I would probably get about 6.5 hours most nights, and I can survive. Like, I do feel like I've been hit by a truck when I wake up, but jump up, have a coffee or a shower, and then I'm fine. Does that catch up with people over time?
Yeah. So sleep is super important, right? So it does all sorts of things for us. We're getting our physical recovery, our mental recovery. Great sleep is where we really get benefits in terms of emotional control, motivation, concentration, focus, immunity boosting. And what actually happens is that different processes are happening at different times during the night. So, what can happen potentially if someone is consistently cutting themselves short? They'll actually be missing out on some of those vital processes. So, a good example of this actually is the other morning I was delivering a seminar for some people in New York, and I'd happily agreed to a 6 a.m. Seminar, which is, totally fine. But I sort of forgot that meant I had to get up super early because I had to walk the dogs and have a shower and whatnot. So I had to set my alarm for 4:30. Now, for me, what would have happened there is I've essentially missed out on an entire sleep cycle. First thing in the morning like that's when we're actually getting a lot of REM sleep. So that's a lot of our mental restoration, cognitive ability, laying down memories, etc. I felt terrible all day. But essentially, I've cut myself short of those specific benefits, right? And whilst you can sort of catch up on sleep, but if you've missed some of those particular processes that happen at a particular time at night, you can't necessarily catch up on those processes. So another example is brain clearing, for example. So we're building up all these toxins during the day. And what happens on a nightly basis is that all of that stuff actually gets flushed out. Now, if you're not sleeping at that particular time and that doesn't get done properly, you don't get a double clean the next night, right? So you're sort of, accumulating that kind of stuff. So that's just one example of how that works. And that's why it's important, if we can, get consistently decent sleep most nights.
And what would you call decent sleep?
So ideally between 7 and 9 hours. But in saying that, everyone is different. So it is absolutely possible that someone might need less. And it's very likely that a lot of people will need more. So depending on how active you are during the day, for example, that actually increases your sleep need. So yeah, completely very, very individual.
Yeah. And what about screen time? So, I mean, I sometimes I'm really determined to get to sleep early. And then I go, oh, I haven't got any groceries for tomorrow. And I get on my Woolworths app and start ordering groceries. And then I get distracted by looking at the news online or something like that. And then suddenly it's midnight. Screens, I assume, are a big no-no. How many hours before we go to sleep should we be avoiding screens?
Yeah. Well, so previously we would have actually said sort of shutting down screens about an hour before sleep. But there has been some new research come out that actually shows that the lighting from devices isn't actually impactive on sleep as what we once thought. Probably got a lot to do with technology. But where it does impact is what you've just alluded to, is where the screen is actually distracting you from going to sleep. So that's sort of the key there. There's probably not a huge issue with being on your device pre-bed, but if you're lying in bed scrolling instead of sleeping, then that's where the problem comes in.
Right. So if you're watching a movie, perhaps that's different to something that's getting your brain active again, thinking about.
Exactly, yeah. So thinking about what you don't want to do right before bed is to do stuff that's really sort of mentally arousing, right? So doing work emails might sort of get the brain kind of going. I mean, jumping online and doing the shopping list, probably okay. You're probably not going to get too wound up over that, right? So it's really thinking about how does that activity make you feel, but also putting in place, I guess, almost a bit of a boundary about when does that device usage stop? Because when it slips into, sleep time and it's actually causing you to sleep less than you feel like you need, then that's really, really the problem.
Can you tell me, Carla, a little bit more about the sort of people that you coach and how long they would work with you and what the process would be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked with all sorts, actually. I have worked with single mums, as I said, coaches, allied health, corporate professionals. So really quite a wide range. And whilst most people do come to me with sleep challenges, I have worked with a couple of people who actually came for more the optimization, just people that were really aware of making sort of small tweaks and how that was going to impact their ability and their, I guess, their longevity and their health span. And those people are typically athletes, or at least the people that I've seen have been athletes. And in terms of working together, so I've played with this quite a bit in the last few years, and where I've landed is a 12-week coaching block with fortnightly catch-ups and then lots of support in between. So it's really to help people to make the changes they need to make to really fix their sleep, but also give them the time to actually make these changes with a view to making sure that the habits stick long term.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about young people? I mean, teenagers, I think after COVID, sleep patterns went out the window. They're often up later than me. It's a total disaster, really. Like, I assume we should be getting these habits formed earlier on in life rather than waiting to their adults and trying to fix it then.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? It's funny because in the last few months, I've been asked about teen sleep quite a bit, whereas I've never really sort of been approached about it before. So, quick disclaimer is that I do work with adults. But the important thing to, I guess, remember about teens is that their circadian rhythm actually moves a little bit later. So it's not surprising to hear that the kids might be staying up later than you because their rhythm literally shifts. So they will naturally be staying up later and naturally want to sleep in later. The problem is that then school, uni, jobs don't align with that natural movement of the circadian rhythm. So yeah, it can be really challenging to make sure that they're getting sleep when they physically feel like they actually need to stay awake. So I think it's just probably being aware of that, but then really helping them dial in on those sleep hygiene factors, because even though you have a disposition to sleep and wake at a certain time, you can definitely use a lot of sort of tools and levers to adjust that and to shift that.
How can you describe some of the benefits that some of your clients have had since they've worked with you and
Yeah,
used their sleep
absolutely.
better?
Absolutely. So the biggest one is getting a decent amount of sleep, right? I think the most obvious symptom for most people is just not feeling rested, recovered, lying in bed awake, unable to sleep. So often the biggest win for me is just having people say, "Oh my gosh, I slept through," or "Wow, I fell asleep in 15 minutes instead of lying awake for an hour." And then ultimately, they feel more rested, they feel more productive, they feel more capable at work. So I do work with quite a few business owners as well. So of course, there's a lot of stress. I mean, there's stress in all sorts of jobs, but I feel like business owners also get a lot of this as well. So just feeling more capable with what they're trying to do, even creativity gets enhanced when you're sleeping well. So, just being able to think about what you're doing and make great decisions and, be a great leader, all that kind of stuff.
I'm definitely not a creative person. Maybe it's because of those
Maybe,
2 hours of sleep I'm missing every night.
maybe it could be.
So Carl, what are there any resources out there or books even that you would recommend if someone was interested in researching this further?
Yes, definitely. So I absolutely love Why We Sleep by Matt Walker. Quick disclaimer on that though, because within that book, he does talk a lot about the negative effects of not getting sleep. And so if someone already has sort of an elevated level of stress and anxiety around their sleep performance, that probably isn't a great resource. The other thing that he has started doing is he's actually got a podcast now. And after he wrote that book, he did actually come out and say publicly that he recognized that he was probably a little bit erring on the negative side of not getting sleep. So in the podcast, he tends to look at the benefits rather than the negatives. So I think the podcast is a great option. Of course, it also takes into account up-to-date science as well, which is great. I also love the Huberman Lab podcast. So he's a neuroscientist. He talks about all sorts of wellness topics, really diverse, but also has some great ones on sleep, stress, drinking, motivation, that kind of stuff. And the Sleep Foundation, actually, in Australia, is really great for really sort of simple, easy to digest information. They've got fact sheets and all that kind of stuff as well.
Great list of resources there. Can you send
Mm,
me the link to those and I'll put them
yeah,
in the notes so that our listeners can find them?
absolutely can.
How can someone find you, Carla, if they are interested in working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Instagram. So, I was speaking to some Kiwis yesterday, so I was using the Kiwi pronunciation of my business name. Aura Sleep Coaching, ORA Sleep Coaching, on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm just on LinkedIn as Carla Butler. On the internet, on the web, www.
Excellent. I'll put those all in the show notes.
Lovely, thank you.
What would be, if someone out there is finding sleep a little bit of an issue at the moment, what would be 3 quick tips you would give them?
Ooh, okay. Um, what I'm finding in my conversations with people is that there are a lot of people that aren't getting outside much. So, one key thing that we do need to really optimize that circadian rhythm is to get natural sunlight in our eyes most mornings, if possible. So, my number one tip, if someone is not already doing this, is to just pop outside, no sunnies, just stand outside, walk around the block for 5-10 minutes most mornings. So that would be the first one. And then I think the other really big one that I find, and this is, this is probably more of a chronic issue, I would say, is if you're not sleeping well, have a little dive into your stress levels. So this is really probably the most common cause I see with clients coming to me. It's all about chronic stress. And oftentimes people are not actually realizing that they're operating from this place of high stress. It's really just become their new normal. But when we're at this elevated level of stress, if for someone who, for example, is going to bed feeling super tired but just can't turn their brain off, that's probably an indication that you might want to look at some stress management strategies, meditation, mindfulness, just something like that to help kind of bring you back down, relax that brain before you go to bed.
And do you do some meditation mindfulness in your coaching package?
I do, yeah. So it really depends on the person because this is so individual. Meditation is not for everyone. So it's really about working with the individual to really find something that resonates with them. So in the past, I've had clients that prefer to draw, for example. That's their, relaxing sort of stress relieving activity. Oftentimes, we might look at some breathing work, just simple box breathing even can be a great place to start. Only takes 5 minutes, but just sort of something to start kind of bringing us back down to that relax, that rest and digest mode, both before sleep, but also in general, right? Because if we're operating from this place of chronic stress all the time, it's going to take a little bit more than 5 minutes a day, but start with 5 minutes and, kind of work up or figure out what works best in terms of, bringing you back down.
Excellent advice. I'm going to try and take some of that on board, Carla. Better go and find a colouring book or something.
Yes, perfect. I love that. That would be the perfect pre-bed activity.
Right. If anyone out there is looking for some assistance, I'll put all Carla's contact details in the show notes so you can message her if you've got a question or give her a call and see if she can help you with some of your sleep issues. So thanks, Carla. Great to chat with you today, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Leah.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.